EMF meter, a Gauss meter, a KII meter, anything that's supposed to tell you whether there is a ghost present, then you need to know how it works. So let's talk about that today. Your phone is not magical. So you have to know what you're measuring. If we want to look at that scientifically, all of the different devices that I mentioned are measuring electromagnetic fields. What they're really measuring is waves. If you want to use them, you're going to have to understand wavelengths and amplitudes. There's a field of science called string theory, which basically tells us that everything that we experience in life, all of the solid objects that we think that we interact with, everything we see and feel is actually made up of waves. It's particles which arise from the vibration of energy. It's frequencies. And electromagnetic frequencies are just one on a spectrum of frequencies. Everything that we can sense and see, anything we can measure, can be broken down into its wavelength. If you're going to research EMF, then you probably want to use a Gauss meter or something that's capable of acting as a Gauss meter, because Carl Friedrich Gauss in the late 1700s was able to define what these electromagnetic fields are. Electromagnetic fields. So you want to do paranormal research scientifically. Well, then we're going to have to use the scientific method. It's the only way to do paranormal research. The scientific method. The scientific method is going to demand that we do some background research, that we come up with a hypothesis, and then that we do some testing with a test group and a control group, and then that we report our results. The parts of that that we're actually doing when we do paranormal research are generally going to be the testing and reporting. There is a vast amount of background research that we can reference, and I think that our community should reference one another a little more than we actually do. There shouldn't be a competition here. If this is science, how come we're not reporting on further research on what has already been discovered? That's what scientists do. Paranormal research. Let's report that one another's findings seem to be correct or incorrect, and we should accept it when we realize that we've made an error or that the results that we found cannot be repeated. Is it a haunting or is it not? A control group and a test group. You'll have to use the same kind of device in the same place and time and position. You can change one factor and one factor only. That factor should be whether or not a haunting is present. You cannot change the position and the time and the place. You can't change any of those things because then that becomes what you're testing. Let me just give a great example. So often on shows that purport to show you paranormal research, we see people going around a purportedly haunted building, waving a device around, saying that they're doing a baseline sweep. Well, that's the amount of EMF that is present in that location, in these infinite number of positions that you're waving the device around in, at that time. The only thing that you're not changing is the place. But you are changing the position of the instrument, and you're changing the time at which you're gathering the data. You should have two devices, one that's supposed to be sensing your paranormal experience, and the other that is not. The other should be a, do not interact with this instrument, please. Don't touch that. That's something that we're trying to get a baseline reading on, at the same time as you're actually communicating with an entity over here. Now, they can't be in exactly the same place. They can't be in exactly the same position, but you can position them so that they're getting parallel readings at all times. You need to experiment with that. How far can we move these and continuously get relatively parallel readings? It takes multiple devices. Not just multiple devices. You have to have more than 1 meter in order to get reliable results. If you want to report on your results, you're going to have 1 meter that's a control and 1 meter that is your test group. So let's talk about devices. There are several different devices you could use to measure electromagnetic fields. You could use a compass, as they did 200 years ago. You could use a Gauss meter or EMF meter, as many electricians and other laborers do today. You could use a K2 meter, although I don't suggest it, and you'll find out why. Or you could even use your smartphone, as long as you know for sure what you're measuring and how to examine those results. Compasses. Do these work? This compass is from 1885, and I'm sure that it helped some adventurer to find his way. If you take a look at this, you'll see that it has your standard northeast, southwest markings inside, and a handy sundial, in case you don't know what time it is. Compasses measure the electromagnetic field, not just of the Earth, but of absolutely everything around them. If you can find fluctuations in a compass that's sitting still on a table, not being waved around in your hand, that indeed is a disturbance in the electromagnetic field. That brings me to another point. The Earth itself has an electromagnetic field. There is always an electromagnetic field surrounding us. Every power line, every power receptacle in the wall, every light bulb that you walk by, every appliance, everything, it's all emitting EMF. Every device that you might carry around in your pocket, like a cell phone or a tablet, the computers, anything that has electricity running to it is going to emit an electromagnetic field. And the meters that you carry around and those who wave them around while they're investigating are going to sense those things. There will be fluctuations. It's guaranteed, because there are so many thousands of devices. And how far does an electromagnetic field reach? Actually, it reaches infinitely, which that might not mean much when you're looking at one small device's output. It's such a small amount that you couldn't measure it over an infinite distance. But when you consider how many thousands and thousands and millions of devices are emitting electromagnetic frequencies all over our planet, and you add them all up into the one giant electromagnetic field that we're creating together every day, there's going to be a lot of fluctuation, and it's going to be absolutely everywhere on our planet. This is a boat compass. This one is in a heavy oil. It's going to be too difficult for any kind of a small fluctuation that a spirit might be able to create to move this around while it's sitting still on a table, because it takes a while for it to move, even if I move it with my hand. Look how slowly that turns. You'll see that when I bring these two close to one another, the magnet in the boat compass is strong enough, even from this distance, to make a great difference in the direction. It's controlling this device. Check that out. This compass is actually reacting to the electromagnetic field produced by the camera. You'll see the needle move to the right as I move closer, and to the left as I move further away. Unfortunately, the same is true for the more precise instruments that electricians use, or that you might want to use. The device that we call a K2 meter. I know lots of us have them, that almost every paranormal expert walks around and waves these devices around. Unfortunately, what do you got, 5 or 6 different LEDs? It tells you maybe 5 or 6 different levels. I honestly think that boat compass is going to be more accurate at telling you if you're having some sort of a special interaction than a K2 meter would. It also measures radio frequencies because it's got such a large range of frequencies that it looks at, and it divides them up into bundles that are so huge that you don't really know what you're measuring. The smartphone. Your smartphone is not magical. You cannot just download any ghost app and ask it, are there ghosts near me, or do you see ghosts on the radar around me, and just assume that whatever it tells you is true. You don't know what it's sensing. You have no idea what you're measuring. Are you measuring EMF? Are you measuring some other kind of presence? If you don't know how the spirit's choosing which word to tell you, how does the spirit know? I mean, we have no idea how they work for 99.9% of the apps that say that they're going to help you communicate with spirits. You're a smart person. You're just interested in researching paranormal activity. Your phone is not magical. If you really want to communicate with spirits, if that's what you want, let's do that. Let's not pretend. There's nothing more disheartening than finding out that you think you're communicating with spirits, and in reality, you're just getting random signal noise. You want to know the truth. Figure out what your device is telling you. Here's how. There might be many apps that actually do measure real things that you can use to do paranormal investigations. I use just a couple of ghost apps that I have installed right now. They are a Gauss meter. You know, we talked about Carl Friedrich Gauss. His meter works. And we have a physics toolbox. And actually, they kind of go together. You can use your physics toolbox to find out which applications will work on your phone. You need to know what you're measuring. This physics toolbox app can tell you what kind of sensors your specific phone has on it and how sensitive they are. So you will know what you're measuring if you not only look at this application, but then know when you look at other applications, what are you measuring? What sensors does my phone really have? For instance, if you think that you're measuring electromagnetic fields, but you don't actually have an electromagnetic sensor on your phone, then what are you measuring? This particular phone does have on it an electromagnetic frequency detector, and I can use a Gauss meter with it. I can test a Gauss meter and make sure that it works. If I hold my Gauss meter near a light bulb, that Gauss meter will show me an electromagnetic field at that space where I'm holding the sensor. Here's my Gauss meter. There are probably 1,000 different apps that will give you a relatively accurate Gauss meter. If we're going to do research, we're doing paranormal research. We're not just trying to get a fright, we're not trying to go to a haunted house and have a scream fest. Then let's use a device that reads accurately, and let's know what it is telling us. If we're trying to communicate with spirits using this, or to find spirits to communicate with using this, then we need to know what we're sensing. And we need to report our findings. And we need to compare that to the kind of results we get when we're just sitting in a room that we don't have any reason to believe is haunted. Turn on your Gauss meter in any hotel room or any basement or any building and see whether or not it changes. It will change. You will see spikes anywhere you go in the whole world. They're not necessarily trying to communicate through your specific device at every moment. So let's decide, why are you investigating paranormal activity using a Gauss meter or an EMF meter or a KII meter? Why are you doing it? Are you trying to prove to yourself? Or are you trying to prove to someone else that ghosts really exist? Or are you trying to communicate with something from the other side? So you're trying to prove it to yourself. Check. That's perfectly valid. So you're trying to prove it to others. Check. That's perfectly valid as well. If you're trying to communicate with spirits, there are many, many ways to communicate with spirits that don't require an EMF meter. Let's communicate in some more direct ways. EMF meter not needed. Are there people out there who could have the same experiences you've had, the same convincing, real experiences that you've had, and still call themselves skeptics? Skepticism. Do you believe in skeptics? I don't.